It begins quietly, as most great discoveries do. Somewhere in the endless dark between planets, a tiny shape drifts into sight. It is faint, almost nothing, a thread of light moving through the black. You do not hear it. You cannot touch it. And yet, something in your mind stirs, the soft pulse of recognition that this object does not belong here. It is foreign, ancient, free. You picture it gliding across the solar wind, unhurried, following a path written long before your world even formed. Around it, the sun's faint glow stretches like golden mist, catching on its surface and scattering light like dust through water. Astronomers, awake in the still hours of night, notice it first, a point that shifts when it should not, moving faster, turning at an angle too sharp for a comet born here. They mark its position, compare it with others, and the numbers whisper their first truth. This thing comes from beyond. You imagine that moment, the collective pause across observatories and minds. Somewhere, a scientist leans closer to screen. Somewhere else, someone feels a small electric thrill of awe. The dot is given a name, a code, 3IATLAS, the third interstellar object known to have crossed into our system. But the name, though technical, hides a more intimate feeling, that of being visited. What kind of journey brings a traveler like this so far? You close your eyes and try to follow its path backward, past Neptune's slow orbit, past the drifting cold of the Kuiper Belt, past even the edge where the sun's light fades to nothing. Out there in interstellar space, the object must have floated through darkness for millions of years. It passed near other stars, perhaps, brushing by the faint warmth of alien suns, collecting the faint dust of unknown worlds. Its silence is not emptiness, but memory. Every molecule of its surface carries the marks of time and distance, scars from cosmic rays, flecks of frozen gases that once evaporated and refroze. You can almost hear the slow music of its existence, the hum of radiation, the soft pressure of photons, the far-off whisper of magnetic fields wrapping around it. When it finally entered the reach of the sun's gravity, it must have felt, if such things have feel, the tug of familiarity, a call from another star. The long inertia of its voyage broke into a curve, a slow spiral inward. That motion, that yielding to light and heat, was how we first noticed it. Through telescopes, you watch its brightness flicker, faint, steady, faint again. Not a simple rock, not an easy guess. It shines differently than expected, reflecting sunlight in an uneven rhythm, like a turning object whose sides are not the same. You picture something long and narrow, perhaps a fragment, perhaps a shard of something larger. No one can yet say, but it holds the promise of stories that the solar system itself cannot tell. The air around you feels still when you think of it, that small traveler from nowhere. For the first time, you sense how thin the boundary is between here and there, between the familiar world of planets and the endless expanse beyond them. Every atom of your own body was once a traveler too, drifting through time, waiting for gravity to gather it into meaning. In that way, 3I/Atlas feels strangely close, a mirror of what you are made of. Scientists begin their quiet work. They point instruments toward it, compare notes, feed numbers into models that hum softly with probability. Its orbit is steep and fleeting, an arc that will take it swiftly past the inner planets before it vanishes again into darkness. There is no second chance. Every observation must be made now. As the images arrive, faint, pixelated, blurred, you see more than data. You see the patience of the universe teaching you how to look slowly. A streak of light across a digital frame becomes a story told in photons that have traveled for minutes, maybe hours, to reach us. The telescope is not just glass and metal. It is a kind of heartbeat stretched across space, translating silence into knowledge. You feel yourself slowed down with the motion of the comet, the way it glides through the sunlight with no hurry, no destination. The world around you hums with ordinary noise, machines, people, weather. But in your mind, there's only that image, the traveler, small and steady, sailing to the golden fabric of the solar system. To look at it is to look at history moving. It is older than any mountain, any ocean, any tree. It may have formed in a disk around another sun, long ago, when that star still burned with youth. Then perhaps a gravitational encounter, a planet too close, a pull too strong. flung it outward into freedom. It carried with it fragments of that forgotten world. Dust, rock, ice. The same ingredients that built ours, rearranged by time. In a way, it is a message that needed no intention to be sent. The universe writes without pen or language, and you, watching from a small planet of oceans and air, have learned how to read. You wonder how many others like it wander unseen, drifting through the interstellar sea. Perhaps thousands, perhaps millions, each a silent messenger between stars, carry with it the chemistry of creation. And though it does not speak, it teaches you something profound. That movement itself can be meaning. In the quiet hours, when most of the world is asleep, you picture it crossing the plane of planets, a shadow moving across sunlight. Its long orbit bends, flattens, and stretches as gravity plays its gentle hand. You can almost feel the warmth of the sun reflected from its distant ice, the faint glimmer reaching your eyes after traveling millions of miles. That light, you realize, is a universe saying, I am still here, still moving, still remembering. Somewhere deep within you, curiosity turns to calmness. The unknown no longer feels threatening. It feels beautiful. You begin to sense the subtle rhythm of discovery. Not an explosion of answers, but a deepening of questions. Soon, the scientist will follow its motion inward, tracing the slow change of brightness, measuring how sunlight awakens its frozen gases. They will watch as the visitor begins to shimmer, its stillness breaking into motion, its silence turning into story. And as the data gather, as the patterns begin to form, you realize this moment, this first meeting, is only the beginning of it unfolding. For every stranger from the dark carries within it the long breath of the cosmos, waiting to be seen. And so you watch, gently, patiently, wondering not just what it is, but what it might reveal when the long journey inward begins. You begin to imagine the long road behind the traveler, a road with no light, no sound, no destination. For ages beyond counting, it drifted through the deep dark, untouched by warmth, unclaimed by gravity. Out there, between stars, the silence is not empty. It is full of invisible particles, magnetic whispers, and the faint hum of background radiation, the afterglow of creation itself. Through this quiet sea, 3IATLAS glides like a memory that refuses to fade. It did not begin here. Long before it met our sun, it circled another star, perhaps one very different from our own. In that distant system, a young star once blazed, surrounded by a thin veil of gas and dust, the cradle of planets. Within that swirling disk, grains collided, joined, froze, and broke apart again. Over time, matter learned the delicate balance between destruction and creation. Out of those collisions came worlds, and among the remnants of that restless birth, this fragment was born. You can picture it, a small body of ice and rock, its shape sculpted by heat and pressure, its surface sealed by frost. Around it, newborn planets tugged and pulled, their gravity like invisible tides. For a time, it may have circled its home star in a wide, distant orbit, a frozen sentinel beyond the glow of warmth. But fate in the cosmos is never still. A passing giant, perhaps a gas world or a wandering neighbor, brushed too close. That encounter changed everything. A slingshot of gravity hurled it away, out of its orbit, out of its system, out of everything familiar. One moment it belonged to a star, the next it was free, cast into the interstellar void, exiled from the gravity that once defined its path. Yet free is a strange word in space. Freedom, here, means endless solitude. It began its long journey through the dark, untethered, carrying within it the cold memory of its birthplace. For millions of years, maybe billions, it drifted between stars. There were no landmarks, no horizons, only the slow drift of interstellar dust and the faint pull of invisible fields. You can imagine it turning slightly, once every few thousand years, its rotation so slow that time itself seemed to stretch around it. Microscopic grains of dust would strike its surface, tiny collisions that left no mark but added to its story. Cosmic rays would pierce through its ice, altering molecules, carving subtle signatures of radiation that now tell scientists how long it wandered alone. You think about the patience required for such a journey, patience beyond human time. The distance between stars is so vast that even light, the universe's fastest traveler, takes years to cross from one to another. For 3I/Atlas, the voyage was measured not in centuries, but in eons. It drifted to the galactic plane, past clouds of hydrogen that glow faintly under the influence of distant stars, past dense knots of dust where new suns were being born. It passed by invisible hands of gravity, the quiet shaping force of the Milky Way, guiding it gently along a curved and ancient path. Every so often, it might have brushed through a faint cloud of interstellar dust, where particles collected on its surface like a fine layer of cosmic ash. Each encounter, no matter how small, left a trace. These traces are what scientists now read like pages in a book. Subtle changes in albedo, in composition, in the faint whisper gases it releases when sunlight finally reaches it. The comet carries in its body the evidence of time so long that even galaxies have changed shape since it began. You imagine yourself riding alongside it, drifting in that cold silence. There's no wind, no sound, only motion through nothingness. Stars do not rush past like in films. They remain still, infinitely far, like jeweled points against black velvet. The only light is what you bring with you, the reflection of distant suns, the faint shimmer of starlight glancing off frozen rock. Time itself feels different here, more fluid, more endless. The mind grows quiet in such company. At some point, though point means little in a timeline this vast, it crosses the invisible boundary between the space of other stars and the outermost shell of our sun's influence. This boundary, called a heliopause, is where the solar wind's breath meets the interstellar wind, two vast, invisible rivers colliding in silence. When 3I/Atlas passed through, it entered the sun's domain. For the first time in perhaps a billion years, light and warmth began to touch its frozen skin. That first touch was gentle, just a faint trickle of heat, barely enough to awaken it. But ice is sensitive to even the smallest change. Molecules of gas that had slept for eons began to stir. The surface, once perfectly still, began to whisper. A faint vapor formed around it, invisible at first, then gradually thickening into a thin envelope, a coma that glowed faintly in sunlight. It was the beginning of its reawakening, the slow return to motion and brightness. As it drew nearer to the inner planets, the sun's gravity curved its trajectory inward. What had been a straight, endless drift became a graceful arc, a dance choreographed by mass and motion. You picture the object now, growing brighter each day, crossing orbits, leaving behind a faint trail of dust that catches sunlight like a thread of gold. It is no longer silent. Its motion speaks. To those watching from Earth, it appears not as a single, but as a moving thought, a presence that reminds you that even what seems lost can find its way home, even if only for a moment. Telescopes on Earth and in orbit begin to capture its form, translating ancient motion into modern data. The images, though small and grainy, hold a power beyond their pixels. They show you how something utterly foreign can move through your familiar sky, as if the universe has momentarily opened its hand to show what lies beyond. You wonder what the traveler might have seen along its endless journey, what stars it passed, what light brushed its frozen surface. Perhaps it has crossed the spiral arms of the Milky Way, weaving through the invisible patterns of our galaxy's own long breath. Perhaps once it drifted near a red giant, a dying star swelling in its last brilliance, and for a moment its ice melted, then refroze in the cold that followed. Every encounter leaves a mark, and every mark becomes a story written in dust and time. To study 3I/Atlas now is to read a message that took millions of years to arrive, a message not written in words, but in matter. Its composition tells of a chemistry that predates our world. Its orbit speaks of invisible gravitational hands that shaped its fate. It carries within it, quite literally, the memory of other stars, traces of the gases and minerals that once formed under alien skies. You realize that by tracing its journey inward, you're not just following a comet. You're following time itself, moving through scales your body cannot feel, but your imagination can. The vastness no longer feels distant. It feels intimate, as if you, too, are made of the same wandering dust. And as you watch its path bending gently toward the light, you understand that this is only the middle of its story, a slow turning point in a tale far older than humanity. For what drifts inward must eventually drift away again. In this quiet realization, You sense what comes next, how the sun's warmth will awaken it further, how light will reveal more than motion. It will reveal the light that reveals. The traveler is no longer only a motion in the dark. Now light begins to find it soft, distant, patient. The sun, so far away that warmth cannot reach, still sends its messengers. Photons, tiny carriers of information, crossing the void at the speed of all that can move. They arrive one by one, striking the frozen surface of 3IATLAS, bouncing outward, altered ever so slightly by what they touch. That reflection, that changed light, becomes the beginning of seeing. Each photon that returns carries a signature, a pattern written in the language of brightness and color. You can't see it with your eyes alone. It takes mirrors of glass and metal, lenses cooled and focused, detectors that count light particle by particle. Yet through those instruments, you begin to piece together an image of something your body will never touch. The object's light arrives late, minutes, sometimes hours delayed, but time doesn't diminish its truth. It is as if the universe has decided to whisper across distance, and your only task is to listen. In that listening, patience becomes an act of discovery. When sunlight hits 3I/Atlas, it does not merely bounce, it transforms. The light that leaves carries with it traces of texture, of ice and dust, of shadow and angle. Some photons are absorbed and re-emitted as faint infrared heat. Others scatter in directions that blur the boundary between light and dark. Scientists call this process reflection and scattering, but to you, it feels more like conversation, an exchange between star and traveler, between warm and cold, between origin and exile. The telescope becomes your eye extended outward, beyond the reach of breath. Its mirrors collect the faintest glimmers and gather them into meaning. You imagine each photon landing gently on a detector, like a raindrop on still water, forming ripples that reveal what was once invisible. Slowly, an image takes shape, a shape that rotates, that brightens and dims, that glimmers with a rhythm too subtle for haste. You see not a clear picture, but an impression, light shaped by motion. It is strange how much can be learned from so little. The brightness tells of distance. The color reveals composition, the faint green hint of frozen carbon, the dull gray of silicate dust, the whisper of water ice beginning to sublime. The pattern of change over time tells of spin, of orientation, of shape. Each measurement becomes a piece of the whole, a brushstroke in a cosmic, painting whose subject is both near and impossibly far. Light, you realize, is the most honest traveler. It goes where matter cannot, carrying with it the essence of what it touches. It fills the universe with memory. Every star you see, every faint gleam from this interstellar visitor, is light telling a story, and you, patient and small beneath your sky, are part of its audience. To understand light is to understand time. The photons that reach Earth tonight left 3I/Atlas long ago, and before that, the sun's light that birthed them left 8 minutes earlier from a nuclear heart 93 million miles away. You are never seeing the comet as it is, but as it was, a subtle delay, a gentle distortion that reminds you, seeing is always a kind of remembering. You begin to notice how even delay can be beautiful. The universe never rushes to reveal itself. It lets you wait, allows you to gather clues slowly. The shape you see is never final. It shifts with every new observation. Sometimes it brightens unexpectedly, as if the comet has turned its face toward the sun and glowed with brief defiance. Other times it dims, swallowed by background light, reminding you that revelation is always partial. As the days pass, the images sharpen. Computer models begin to fit the data, long, narrow, slightly tumbling. It doesn't spin neatly like a top but rotates in a wobbling dance, as if unsettled by its long solitude. The brightness variations confer what your eyes sense, an object irregular and complex, neither simple sphere nor smooth ellipsoid. Its surface likely rough, fractured, perhaps layered from its formation billions of years ago. You think of how light touches every corner differently, how ridges, cracks, and shadowed hollows all respond in their own way. To illuminate something fully is impossible. Even in science, even in the clear gaze of data, something remains unseen, hidden in the angle that light cannot reach. Yet that unlit space, that quiet absence, becomes part of the beauty. The act of seeing itself feels holy in its patience. Every observation is a form of trust that what you look at will speak, even if faintly, even if slowly. Astronomers across the world share their glimpses, combining them into a mosaic of brightness and motion. The light curves a line. The measurements begin to tell a story of increasing activity. Sunlight awakening ancient ice. Jets of vapor may soon appear, thin plumes that scatter sunlight like veils of breath. You think of how light awakens not only matter, but attention. The more the comet reflects, the more you see. The more you see, the more your imagination begins to follow. Science becomes a form of reverence, a way of holding wonder steady until it reveals its pattern. Still, light carries uncertainty too. Not all that glows is simple to explain. Some wavelengths hint at compounds never seen before in comets, others at temperatures colder than expected. Perhaps this object's chemistry is slightly alien, formed around a star with a different balance of elements, a different story of creation. The data are careful, but light's language is subtle, often double-edged. Every discovery answers and unasks at once. You think of the human eye, how it sees only a small slice of all light, a narrow band called visible. Yet beyond that band lies a symphony of wavelengths: ultraviolet, infrared, radio, X-ray. Instruments expand your vision, teaching you that reality is always larger than perception. 3IATLAS glows in many colors you cannot see, and together they form a portrait far richer than any single view. To watch it is to practice humility. You stand on a planet warmed by one star, looking outward at an object born near another. Between them lies light, the one universal messenger that crosses every distance without ever losing speed. Its constancy becomes a comfort. It reminds you that, despite vastness, the same physics connect all things. The same photons that reveal the comet's form once illuminated your own world at dawn. Night after night, you follow the reports, the images, the quiet accumulation of meaning. And somewhere deep inside, the act of watching becomes personal. You feel not just curiosity, but kinship, with light, with matter, with motion. The traveler's brightness becomes a mirror for your own seeking. How you, too, move through darkness, reflecting what touches you, carrying it forward. The more you watch, the more you realize that light does not simply reveal, it also transforms. To illuminate something is to change it, to warm it, to make it active, to alter what it was. The comet that glows today is not the same as the one first touched by sunlight. Heat stirs its core, reshaping the icy body into something new. And with each passing day, it drifts closer, brighter, more alive. Soon, scientists will notice faint jets, the first signs of motion breaking free from stillness, proof that beneath reflection lies energy, a restless stirring from within. And as you breathe with that thought, you feel the transition forming quietly, like dawn behind the horizon. Light not only shows what is there, it awakens what was waiting to move. In the beginning, you mistake it for stillness, a small cold object, sliding soundlessly through space. No engines, no wings, no trail of fire, just a slow unfolding of distance. You think of it as motionless because everything around it, the black canvas, the frozen stars, seems so calm, so perfectly fixed. But in truth, nothing in the universe stands still. Every atom, every grain of dust, every whirl and wanderer is carried by a deeper motion, invisible yet absolute. You follow it with your mind's eye through the emptiness between planets. The sun's faint gravity touches it from afar, a gentle hand pulling, curving its course like a whisper through the dark. The object responds in silence, bending but never breaking, surrendering only as much as physics demands. Even here, at the edge of the solar system, the pull of the sun is never gone, only softened, stretched thin like music heard from another room. It is easy to forget that space is not empty. The void is alive with unseen tides, magnetic fields, radiation, drifting grains of ice. The traveler passes through these invisible rivers, and though you cannot see them, they sculpt its journey. The particles that strike its surface leave faint scars, ancient weather marks etched by starlight and time. You imagine it spin, slow, perhaps once faster, now softened by eons of travel. As it turns, light glances off patches of frost, off veins of darker rock that glimmer only briefly before disappearing into shadow again. It is like watching a single snowflake drift in the wind, so far away you can barely tell it moves. But every rotation tells a story of balance. How it holds its shape, how gravity and sunlight argue quietly across its body. Then, something begins to change. Close to the sun, the cold shell stirs. You see a faint haze rising from its surface. Not smoke, not dust, but vapor. The warmth of sunlight begins to reach into its frozen skin, and the ancient ice responds. Molecules that have slept for millions of years start to move again, slipping free into the void. Jets of gas burst gently from hidden cracks, pushing in ways too subtle for the eye to follow. This is how you learn that motion can come from within. It doesn't always need a force from outside. Sometimes, change is born from the traveler itself. As it exhales, the faintest shift in direction begins. These whispers of vapor become its breath, altering its path more than gravity alone ever could. Scientists on Earth notice it, too. They measure the motion, puzzled by how it does not align perfectly with their equations. The trajectory bends slightly more than expected, as if the object has chosen a path of its own. They call it non-gravitational acceleration, a phrase too mechanical for such quiet mystery. But you understand it differently. You see it as a story of an ancient body remembering how to move, a dance of sunlight and ice, invisible but precise. You think about the paradox of stillness, how even silence has motion, and how movement itself can hide in patience. The traveler, gliding through vacuum, becomes a mirror for your own thoughts. Inside your mind, too, there are forces that act without being seen, memories thawing, ideas turning over, small awakenings that shift your course by fractions of a degree. Perhaps this is how all journeys truly happen, not in leaps, but in quiet drift. The sun continues to grow brighter in its sky. You can almost feel the heat touching its frozen crust, the faint hiss of sublimating ice turning into the soft push of motion. The traveler's spin wobbles ever so slightly. Not chaos, but a reminder of fragility. Even here, precision is never perfect. Space tolerates imperfection as part of its harmony. You find yourself breathing slower. Imagine the rhythm of that rotation. Once every few hours. Perhaps each turn carrying new light across old scars. Each shadow replaced again and again by the soft gold of the sun. There is no rush, no destination in sight. Only the eternal unfolding of direction. Motion, you realize, is not always forward. It can be circular or curved or even inward, a way of learning the same lesson from different angles. The traveler does not hurry toward the sun. It merely yields to it. The warmth writes its destiny one molecule at a time, and all it must do is continue turning. When the vapor jets fade again, the silence returns. But it's a different silence now, not the stillness of cold emptiness, but the pause after an act of remembering. The object continues, slightly changed, carrying invisible signatures of its own breath, invisible traces of sunlight pressed into its orbit. From your distant view, you begin to understand the elegance of this dance, a balance of pull and release, surrender and persistence. Gravity calls, sunlight answers, and the traveler moves between them like a whisper balancing on the edge of sound. You close your eyes, imagining yourself as that drifting fragment. You, too, are moving, not always knowing where, but guided by forces larger than understanding. Sometimes you are pulled. Sometimes you push yourself onward with quiet acts of will. And sometimes it is enough to simply drift and trust that even motion you cannot measure still has meaning. Somewhere ahead, the light grows stronger. The traveler's path bends again, and new shadows bloom across its face. The stillness you once thought you saw has become a symphony of invisible gestures, a reminder that even silence can move with purpose. And as it moves closer, another truth begins to shimmer in your thoughts. That light not only reveals, but also changes what it touches. And so, your gaze shifts from its motion to the brightness that awaits, to the light that reveals. You look again at the light. It seems simple, sunlight reflected off a distant traveler. But the more closely you observe, the more you notice that the light itself carries messages. It is not just brightness. It is a code, Each beam is a carrier of memory, passing through dust, crossing distances longer than comprehension, and touching your instruments on Earth as if whispering from the other side of time. Through your telescope, that single glint becomes something extraordinary. It spreads into a ribbon of color, a spectrum, unfurling like silk. It is here, in this spectrum, that the object begins to speak. Faint dips and rises mark the presence of invisible storytellers, elements and compounds, each one leaving a signature as distinct as a heartbeat. You trace the lines with your eyes, slowly, as though reading a secret alphabet. Some belong to water, frozen and patient, formed in the deep interstellar cold. Others hint at carbon, at oxygen, at dust older than the sun itself. Each element has its own voice, its own rhythm of absorption and reflection. Together, they compose a melody that is both scientific and deeply human, the language of light interpreted by curiosity. In the soft darkness of your room, you imagine the scene unfolding billions of kilometers away, a rock of ice turning gently, the sun's rays striking its uneven face, scattering photons in every direction. Those photons travel, silent, unbending, obedient to the laws of physics, until a few reach your waiting lens. What your instruments see is not the object itself, but its reflection, a light bent, filtered, and flavored by its journey. The spectrum is not a picture in the ordinary sense. It is more like a song played by chemistry. Each molecule absorbs certain colors of light, leaving tiny dark notches in the rainbow. Those missing pieces are clues, a pattern that tells you what substances are present, what temperatures they endure, and how ancient their origins might be. This is how you come to know a traveler, without ever touching it. No spacecraft visits, no sample returns. And yet, by reading the starlight that glances from its skin, you can taste the elements of its making. It is as if you could know the flavor of fruit by the pattern of light it reflects, or the scent of forest by the way the air bends a sunbeam. Scientists call this spectroscopy, the study of light to understand what it has touched. But you might think of it as something older, almost spiritual, listening to the voice of the cosmos through its vibrations. Each spectrum is like a fingerprint, a mark that cannot be forged. No two worlds, no two stars, no two fragments of ice and dust are ever truly the same. Their colors differ slightly. Their lines shift in ways that betray their journeys, their temperatures, their inner restlessness. You imagine the first time humans saw a spectra like these, faint bands etched across the glowing light of stars. They, too, must have felt the wonder of discovery, realizing that this was a universal language, one that could be read across infinite distances. To read a spectrum is to read the autobiography of light itself. The traveler's signature, however, holds something unusual. Some of its lines do not fit what you expect. They hint at molecules not common to our familiar comets. Ratios of carbon and oxygen are slightly off, as if it were formed under a different kind of star, one that burned colder or perhaps died long ago. You picture it forming in a faraway system, orbiting a sun that has since vanished, before being flung out into the dark. How long has it wandered? 1,000,000 years? 1,000,000,000? There is no way to tell precisely. But every line in the spectrum is a fossil of its past. Light becomes a time machine, carrying the chemical echoes of another sky. You begin to sense how vast elsewhere truly is, not just a distance, but a difference in conditions, histories, and stories. In one spectral band, you see traces of organic molecules, carbon chains, perhaps methanol or cyanide, fragile compounds born in the cold nursery of interstellar clouds. These are not signs of life, but they are its potential, its raw ingredients. Even out here, in the emptiness between suns, chemistry persists. You realize that life does not arise from magic, but from patience, from time's slow sculpting of matter under gentle heat and endless motion. Each line you read feels like a word from another civilization, not a people, but a physics. You are learning a dialect that speaks in wavelengths and frequencies, a language older than speech. When you listen closely, the message seems almost personal. The traveler says, "This is what I am made of. This is where I have been. This is how the universe remembers me." There's a tenderness in that thought. You think of how everything in the universe leaves a mark, not just comets or stars, but you as well. The carbon in your breath, the calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, all once belonged to other stars. You, too, carry a spectral signature, invisible but real. The atoms of your body tell suns that lived and died before Earth was born. To study the light of this traveler is, in a quiet way, to study yourself. The faint irregularities in the object's light curve, the small flickers, the slight dimming and brightening, tell even more. They reveal shape, rotation, maybe even texture. You begin to see not only what it's made of, but how it behaves. The light becomes a sculpture carved from absence, a silhouette made from information. And still, the mystery remains. Even as you decode its chemistry, its composition, its reflectivity, there is something about it that refuses to be known. Perhaps it is the origin that escapes you. Which star, which system, which ancient collision sent it on its way? Or perhaps what you cannot grasp is not scientific at all, but emotional. The sheer loneliness of a body cast adrift for eternity, carrying a message no one was meant to hear. The thought lingers in you like a long note. Maybe every world that leaves its home system becomes a kind of storyteller, carrying evidence that the universe has no boundaries for motion, no borders for memory. Maybe the traveler is not lost, but free. Proof that even when separated from origin, a thing can still carry its identity within. As you stare at the spectral lines, you feel something shift within you. Light, you realize, is not just a messenger. It is the archive of existence itself. It records without judgment. It reveals without sound. And even after the source has moved on, light continues its journey, bearing witness to what once was. You close your eyes and imagine that faint glimmer still crossing the solar system, carrying its spectral language into human minds, into instruments, into thought. The universe does not speak in words, but in wavelengths. And tonight, under a quiet sky, you learn to listen, because in every color, in every reflection, there hides a question that has not yet found its answer, a question that waits for light itself to reveal. You sit with the image glowing faintly before you, a small, icy traveler framed against the deep. Its light is thin, stretched by distance, almost swallowed by the black around it. And yet, that glimmer carries an entire story of exile. It does not circle any star. It follows no repeating path. It moves in a long, graceful curve that never closes, never returns. You realize what that means. This is a world without a home. Unlike comets born within the solar system, those that sleep in the far reaches and awaken only when sunlight calls, this one comes from somewhere beyond. It has no orbit that loops it back, no parent sun to warm it again. It travels in what scientists call a hyperbolic trajectory, a line that passes once and never twice. Its journey through our solar system is a single crossing, a brief hello from infinity. You imagine the silence that follows such motion. For billions of years, perhaps, it has drifted through the interstellar dark, untouched by starlight, unseen by any eye. The nearest star would have been a faint glow, barely enough to cast a shadow on its frozen surface. In that endless quiet, there was no dawn, no dusk. Only the soft irradiation, the constant drift of cosmic dust. And yet, somehow it survived. Its ices did not melt. Its minerals remained intact. The chemistry carved into its skin tells you it was formed long ago, under a different sun. One that once warmed it, pulled it close, then flung it outward with violent grace. Perhaps it was born in a planetary nursery, surrounded by other worlds and gas clouds. Perhaps it was part of a disk of dust and rock circling a young star, before gravitational tides or collisions tore it free. When that happened, it would have been thrown into an escape, a cosmic eviction, a slow ejection from everything it knew. The force that expelled it also gave it freedom, a chance to wander the galaxy untethered. You picture that moment, a world cast adrift. No sound, no explosion, just a shift of balance. A delicate mathematical dance ending in release. It would have drifted past the last planet of its home system, past the invisible border where its star's gravity faded to nothing. Beyond that line lies interstellar space, the vast ocean between suns. Few things cross it, and fewer still survive. But this traveler did. You think of the endurance that requires. To drift for eons through radiation storms, through the gravitational whispers of distant systems, through the debris of exploding stars, and yet to remain whole. Its loneliness becomes a lesson in patience. You begin to wonder what loneliness means in a universe like this. To be alone requires comparison, to know what together once felt like. And perhaps this traveler remembers, in some physical way, the warmth of an original sun. The ice within it still holds that memory, trapped in its crystalline bonds. Every molecule a frozen echo of its creation, hydrogen and oxygen once warmed by a light that no longer shines upon it. You realize that space is full of such wanderers. Astronomers suspect there may be trillions of these orphan worlds drifting between stars, rogue planets, comets, and fragments of matter cast loose from their birthplaces. Some of the size of mountains, others the size of Earth itself. Entire planets, floating in the dark, with only their own heat to keep them alive. It's humbling to imagine such abundance of isolation. Every system births not only worlds that stay, but worlds that leave. The universe, it seems, practices both gravity and release, both belonging and letting go. You think of how that mirrors your own experience of life. How every beginning also carries a leaving. How even in the act of forming connections, there are forces that eventually pull you apart. Yet, just as this traveler shows, being unbound does not mean being lost. To move freely through the galaxy is also a kind of belonging to motion itself, to the wide, shared silence of everything that moves without destination. The traveler's path through our solar system is a brief one, for a few months or years. It becomes part of our sky, its arc traced by telescopes and computers. You imagine the astronomers watching its progress, how their instruments record its changing position each night, how they fit those points into a curve, and realize that curve never bends back. The equations tell the truth before the heart can grasp it. This visitor will not stay. It entered from the dark and will leave into the dark again. But while it's here, it gives us something we didn't know we were missing. A reminder that the universe extends beyond what we can see or orbit, that space is not defined by what it holds, but by what passes through it. Sometimes you think we understand things best when they are fleeting. A comet that returns becomes familiar, almost predictable. But a traveler like this, seen once and never again, awakens something different. Curiosity without closure, beauty without ownership. You imagine standing beneath the same night sky as those who discovered it. The object is invisible to the naked eye, but knowing it's there changes how you feel. Somewhere out there, a fragment from another system crosses the void, unnoticed except by the patient instruments that listen to the faintest reflections of light. Its story, written across millions of years, passes through your solar system like a single note in a vast cosmic symphony. You find yourself wanting to follow it, not physically, but in thought, to see what it sees beyond the planets, beyond the reach of sunlight. Between the stars, there is no up or down, no direction that makes more sense than another. Time itself becomes soft air, stretched by distance. 1,000,000 years can pass between one encounter and the next. And perhaps you think this is not loneliness at all, but freedom. Freedom from orbit, from repetition, from the gravity of expectation. A world that answers to no star is still part of the galaxy's rhythm. It moves with the same quiet inevitability as everything else. You close your eyes and imagine yourself drifting with it, not lost, but wandering. Around you, the Milky Way stretches like a glowing river. Each star a possible memory, a possible home you never needed to reach. You understand now that motion without destination can still have meaning. The journey itself is the belonging. The traveler continues, silent as thought, its course set by nothing but the balance of forces that rule all things. It will pass beyond Neptune's orbit, beyond the edge of our sun's reach, and once more into the ocean between stars. For a moment, it will carry traces of our light upon its skin, the faint warmth of our sun, the invisible pull of our gravity, before letting even those fade. And yet, because you have seen it, it will never entirely leave. Its image lingers in your mind, a small world adrift, shining faintly with the borrowed light of another star. You think of how every meeting, even the briefest, changes both the traveler and the observer. Light exchanged, gravity shared, paths altered, however slightly. Nothing in the universe ever passes by untouched. In the deepening quiet, one thought remains. that perhaps in the measureless sea between suns, there are more travelers like this one, crossing unseen, each bearing its own story of loss, survival, and freedom. And as you picture them drifting, countless and unbound, you begin to wonder, what happens when two such wanderers meet, if only for a moment, in the dark? It begins not with light, but with its interruption. A distant star shines steadily, indifferent to your gaze, until, for a moment, its light falters. A fraction of its brilliance dims, then brightens again, as though something invisible brushed across its face. You might miss it if you blink. Yet, within that momentary shadow, an entire story is written, one of shape, size, and motion. You watch from Earth, your instruments trained on that small trembling of starlight. The brightness rises and falls with exquisite precision, as if the universe is breathing in time with your own quiet anticipation. That pulse of light, those tiny fluctuations, they are how astronomers read the invisible. They call it the light curve, a graph that transforms faint twinkles into a portrait of form, a world passing in front of its sun, a comet drifting between stars, an interstellar visitor revealing its outline through the language of shadow. In space, there are no silhouettes cast on walls, no ground for a shadow to fall upon. There is only light in its absence, recorded by instruments so sensitive they can sense a single photon out of place. To study what cannot be touched, you must learn to read what is missing. You must look for what light refuses to show directly. When a mysterious object, the one that wandered in from beyond, crosses a line between you and a distant sun, it whispers through darkness. You cannot see its details, but you feel its presence in the slight, rhythmic fading of starlight. From that fading, scientists begin to guess how wide it might be, how it spins, how sunlight glances off its tumbling shape. Imagine standing in a forest at dusk. A bird darts between trees, too fast to follow, but its shadow glides across your hand. You cannot see the bird, but you know it is there. That is how astronomy often works, not by looking directly at what is, but by tracing the shape of what isn't. You begin to understand that absence itself is full of information. When the object reflects less light than expected, perhaps its surface is darker, covered in carbon dust, the residue of cosmic fires long extinguished. When the light flickers unevenly, perhaps it is rotating in a strange, unbalanced way. Every brightness and every dimming becomes a clue, a soft code written across the heavens. There's a beauty in this kind of seeing, in learning that knowledge doesn't always arrive as brilliance, but sometimes as hush. The cosmos rarely shouts its truths. It whispers them through shadows, through faint signatures of reflected light, through the pause between photons. You begin to realize that perception itself is an act of translation, the conversion of silence into meaning. Even here on Earth, the same principle holds. You understand a friend not just by what they say, but by what they leave unsaid. You know the moon's roundness even when you see only a crescent. You infer the depth of the ocean by the way it muffles sound. The universe speaks through implication, and you, the listener, learn to hear what isn't spoken. When astronomers analyze the data, they find patterns, repeated dips, irregular bursts, sudden increases of brightness. Perhaps a jet of vapor erupted from the traveler's surface, reflecting a little more sunlight for a while. Perhaps a fragment broke free, trailing a faint plume. The pattern looks random, but nature is rarely careless. There's rhythm in the chaos if you're patient enough to listen. You imagine this object, tumbling silently to the light of alien suns, its rotation unpredictable, its reflection uneven. It has no face turned toward you, no fixed orientation, no desire to reveal itself. Yet, with careful watching, the light betrays it. Through brightness and dimness, through shadow and glint, it begins to draw its own portrait, one line at a time, one photon at a time. There's comfort in that slowness. In a universe so vast, knowledge arrives not in flashes, but in steady patience. Telescopes gather data night after night, each pixel a faint echo of something unimaginably far away. You learn that discovery is not a single event. It's an accumulation, a quiet weaving of light and absence into understanding. Sometimes, the object brightens unexpectedly, not from reflected sunlight, but from its own internal release. Perhaps frozen gases beneath its surface begin to sublimate, turning from solid to vapor as it nears warmth. Tiny jets shoot out, altering its path ever so slightly. These bursts catch sunlight and scatter it, and for a while, the object glows. Its shadowed secrets become visible, not through illumination from outside, but from energy emerging within. You sit with that image of something unknown revealing itself not by being lit, but by briefly lighting itself. There's a lesson in that, too. Perhaps illumination isn't only what happens when light strikes. Perhaps it's what happens when something begins to respond, to change, to reveal its nature through movement. The universe has many ways of being seen. Sometimes through reflection, sometimes through shadow, sometimes through the traces left in the airless silence between stars. To see in astronomy is to accept incompleteness, to hold an outline and call it true for now, knowing it might shift tomorrow. As data accumulates, patterns sharpen. You begin to model the object's surface, irregular, perhaps elongated, perhaps coated in organic frost. You cannot be certain, but certainty has never been the point. What matters is a relationship between the seen and unseen, between brightness and void. Science, like poetry, thrives in that interval. You think of the starlight that traveled years to reach your telescope, the photon scattered by a distant traveler that once drifted between worlds. The light you read tonight might have begun its journey before you were born. Yet here it is, telling you, softly, that even what drifts without purpose leaves a trace behind. In the stillness of your observatory, surrounded by hums of cooling fans and the low click of a guiding motor, you find yourself attuned to this rhythm of light. You are no longer looking at the universe, but listening through it. Every star becomes a voice, every dimming a pause in a vast celestial sentence. And as you watch, as you record, as you interpret, you begin to feel that the act of seeing has changed you. You've learned to honor absence, to trust the invisible, to read silence as truth. You've learned that sometimes the universe shows itself best in the moments when light seems to fade. In that quiet comprehension, something shifts. The shadow becomes not an interruption of light, but part of its language. What you once called darkness now feels like depth, an opening towards something else, something deeper. Perhaps, you think, if shadow can reveal form, then maybe the next step is to listen not to light at all, but to the faint murmurs hidden beneath it, a signal, perhaps, or a pattern that doesn't belong to any known rhythm, something waiting just beyond the brightness. You watch the object drift across the dark, a pale, glinting traveler carried by forces it cannot see. To your eyes, it seems free, coasting to the silence between stars. But freedom in the cosmos is never absolute. Every motion is a conversation. Every orbit is a reply. What you see is not a straight line, but the trace of invisible pull, the curvature of space itself bending around presence of matter. You feel it almost physically, the slow tug of gravity reaching across distance. Even from billions of kilometers away, the sun holds it, its warmth and mass shaping a subtle arc in the object's path. The planets, too, add their whispers to the pull. Jupiter with its immense weight, Neptune with its far, patient influence. Each exerts its quiet persuasion, tugging, releasing, tugging again. It's not a fall, not exactly. It's more like a dance, a slow spiraling toward and away, an intricate rhythm written into the geometry of the universe. Gravity is not a force in the way you imagine pushes and pulls on Earth. It is the bending of space-time itself. The way mass tells space how to curve, and space tells matter how to move. You don't see this curvature, but you can feel its shape in the movement of everything. In the planets tracing ellipses, in comets looping towards sunlight, in galaxies turning like vast pinwheels in the dark. If you could draw the invisible paths of these motions, they would look like threads of silk draped across a black ocean. Each star and planet weaves its own pattern, tugging slightly at its neighbors, forming ripples that extend forever. You realize that the universe is not still, not frozen, but endlessly responsive, each motion echoing through every other. The object, this interstellar wanderer, is no exception. As it glides past the sun, it feels the curvature of our system, the deep well of gravity that surrounds it. Its trajectory bends, just slightly, not enough to capture it, but enough to change it forever. a gravitational handshake, brief and profound. After this encounter, it will never follow the same line again. You picture space as a great ocean. The object is a small boat carried by invisible tides. The sun is a whirlpool, massive but graceful, its current spreading outward to the planets. The boat doesn't crash or stop. It simply swirls, gains speed, changes direction, and continues on. Gravity is not a wall. It's an invitation to turn, to flow, to join a larger movement. Einstein once described gravity not as a force, but as geometry. A massive body like the sun doesn't pull anything. It simply bends a stage upon which everything moves. You imagine laying a heavy sphere on a sheet of fabric. The fabric dips, and smaller marbles roll toward it. What you're seeing is space-time responding to mass. The marbles aren't pulled by strings. They're simply following the natural curves of the fabric beneath them. And yet, the simplicity of this image hides something wondrous, that the fabric itself is a universe. You live upon that surface. You move through its folds. Even time, the flow you think of as constant, bends with it. When the traveler passes close to a massive body, time itself slows ever so slightly for it. Each second it experiences becomes just a fraction longer. The dance of gravity is also a dance of time. You find something deeply calming in that motion and time are never truly separate. The pull you feel is not only spatial, but temporal. Every planet, every asteroid, every human heartbeat exists within this woven field of influence. You are, right now, part of that same cosmic choreography. Your body, your breath, the pull of the earth beneath you, all of it is gravity in dialogue with matter. For the traveler, though the dance is brief, it schemes the inner system and begins its long climb back toward the stars. The sun's influence fades, and the other planets release their hold. It will continue outward, tracing a new path that curves gently away from us, like a comet's farewell. Yet even as it escapes, gravity still follows, not as a leash, but as memory. Its velocity, its direction, its spin, all of it bears the marks of the gravitational music it once danced to. You imagine what would happen if it had passed just a little closer. The sun might have captured it, turned it into a new comet, bound it into a long, cold orbit. Or perhaps a planet's pull could have flung it elsewhere, redirecting it toward another star entirely. In every possible future, gravity writes the choreography, a delicate balance of mass, distance, and motion. From Earth, astronomers trace these paths, solving equations that predict how the traveler bends, accelerates, and escapes. But behind every calculation lies a kind of poetry, a recognition that everything moves together, that nothing travels untouched. Even chaos follows a rhythm if you listen long enough. You think about the Voyager probes, still drifting outward decades after their launch. They, too, are now dancers in the interstellar dark, moving to the same field that shaped this visitor's course. Though they seem alone, they are connected by the same invisible fabric, the same laws, the same curvature of space-time. You realize that loneliness in the universe is an illusion. Everything is held softly, invisibly, by gravity's embrace. Even light, the fastest traveler of all, cannot escape this dance. When it passes near a massive body, its path bends, not because light is mass, but because the space it moves through is curved. Astronomers call this gravitational lensing, and it allows you to see distant galaxies whose light has been bent around others. You see, through curved light, what would otherwise remain hidden. Gravity, then, is not only the sculptor of motion, but a revealer of what lies beyond sight. The traveler's path is shaped by these same curvatures. When you map it, you see that it doesn't move alone. Its story is the sun's story, Jupiter's story, the story of every atom that once brushed past it. The dance of gravity is the universe's way of ensuring that nothing exists in isolation. You pause and let that thought rest in you. Even here on Earth, every step you take is an answer to gravity's invitation. You walk not by resisting it, but by momentarily letting it catch and release you. The tides rise, the moon orbits, and you, a small observer on a small world, move in the same pattern. You are not separate from the cosmic dance. You are part of its rhythm. And as you look again at the traveler, now fading into the distance, you realize that gravity has done more than bend its path. It has drawn your attention to connection itself, to the invisible web that binds all things through time and space. Perhaps you think, if gravity weaves a dance of motion, then something else must weave a dance of meaning. The silent force that connects minds, not masses. Something unseen but felt, something that, like gravity, draws us toward one another, even across the void. You sit before a field of stars, not with your eyes, but with data. Lines of numbers, faint streaks across pixelated darkness. Radio waves turn into light and sound. At first, it all seems chaotic. Static, flicker, confusion. Yet your mind cannot help but search. Even in noise, you look for pattern. Even in randomness, you lean toward meaning. The traveler, this small object drifting through the solar system, appears first as a blur, a smudge of reflected sunlight across a digital frame. You scroll through images, one after another, each nearly identical. Then, as the hours pass, a shift, just a few pixels, betrays motion. That tiny movement against the background of stars becomes a heartbeat, a sign of life among the stillness. It's the same instinct that once helped your ancestors spot movement in tall grass or track clouds across the horizon. Pattern recognition is not only intelligence, it is survival, woven deep into the folds of your brain. Now, it turns its ancient focus toward the cosmos, reading faint lights instead of paw prints, radio static instead of rustling leaves. But finding pattern in the universe is not always easy. The data that returns from telescopes is full of interference, cosmic rays, electronic hum, noise from Earth itself. Scientists learn to listen beyond it, to filter, to separate signal from static. It's like listening to whispers through a storm. The mind must quiet itself, must hold still long enough for a rhythm to emerge. You imagine that process as an art of patience. Long exposures gather photons one by one, each a traveler from far away. In the final image, every dot of brightness is a record of something real, a photon that has journeyed for millions of years, now ending its story on a mirror glass. But within that light, patterns emerge only through repetition. The more you look, the more meaning condenses. Astronomers speak of light curves, spectral lines, orbital traces. These are patterns too, not of sight, but of change. You can tell what something is by how its light wavers. A star with a planet will dim rhythmically as the planet passes in front. A comet will brighten and fade as it releases gas and dust. Even this interstellar traveler, tumbling through sunlight, flickers in a rhythm all its own. That rhythm tells a story. The changes in its brightness hint at its shape, perhaps elongated, perhaps rotating irregularly. You can imagine it, a dark shard of rock, twisting slowly through sunlight, revealing and concealing its facets like breath through a window pane. From faint pulses of light, your mind sketches geometry, depth, motion. The universe rarely gives up its secrets directly. It speaks in patterns that must be heard sideways, through persistence and imagination. You see scientists at their screens, not unlike artists before blank canvases. Both search for order hidden in complexity. Both interpret what cannot be seen directly. Both risk seeing what they wish to find. Because that's the other truth about patterns. Sometimes they are illusions. The human mind is a master connection. It sees faces in clouds, figures in constellations, signals in noise. You call this pareidolia. But it is also the seed of discovery. The danger and the wonder come from the same root. The desire to make sense of what seems senseless. So you tread carefully. The traveler's flicker might be a clue, or coincidence. Its spectrum might reveal molecules, or it might be distorted by sunlight. The challenge is to balance imagination with evidence, intuition with discipline. You learn to dance between the two, neither denying the poetry nor the precision of the universe. You think of Galileo, sketching Jupiter's moons night after night, seeing their shifting positions and realizing they orbit something other than Earth. From those tiny dots of light, a whole new pattern of thought emerged, the heliocentric truth that changed everything. From dots came meaning. From meaning, a revolution in understanding. Now, you sit in that same lineage, the quiet observer tracing light into insight. The traveler is your new pattern to decode. You look for consistency in the flicker, for periodicity in the data, for a rhythm that might whisper of its spin or shape. And there, just faintly, you find it, a repeating signature. The object turns once every 8 hours, revealing a side brighter than the other. You imagine that spin as a slow, cosmic breath, light and shadow taking turns across its surface. Its day and night are written into your graphs, a gentle oscillation, a wave in the data that feels almost alive. Each repetition brings comfort, confirmation that chaos, even here, has order folded within it. Patterns, you realize, are bridges. They link perception to truth, intuition to knowledge. Through them, you connect not only with the universe, but with the minds of others who have stared into similar darkness, searching for form. Each discovery adds another thread to that human tapestry of understanding. And yet, beneath every pattern, there remains mystery. The traveler's flicker tells you it spins, but not what carved its shape. Its spectrum reveals ice and dust, but not the story of its creation. Meaning always expands faster than certainty. The more you find, the more there is to find. You lean back and close your eyes for a moment, letting the hum of machines and faint ticking of data streams fade into the background. The cosmos speaks in quiet repetition. Pulsars beating like metronomes, orbits looping endlessly, galaxies spiraling in familiar geometries. Noise becomes rhythm. Randomness becomes structure. And through that transformation, understanding begins. Perhaps that's what makes the act of observation so profoundly human. To look into the vast, indifferent dark and still search for coherence. Not because the universe must make sense, but because you hope it does. Because meaning itself is a light, faint but persistent, flickering across the noise of existence. And so, as the traveler fades again into statistical faintness, you keep watching. Each pixel, each photon, carries the possibility of revelation. You know that somewhere in this seeming chaos, another pattern is waiting. Something subtler, something that may change what you think you know. You take one more look at the data, the quiet pulse of brightness that repeats like a soft heartbeat. It feels familiar, the same rhythm you feel in yourself when you listen closely, the same pulse that binds perception to patience. And as you breathe with it, you wonder, if light can hide meaning within noise, then what might time itself be hiding in its repetitions? The object first appeared as a whisper, a faint shimmer against the black. At first glance, it looked like a comet, tail faintly streaming, light pulsing as if alive. But as telescopes fixed their gaze, the details refused to settle. Its reflection was wrong. Its spin defied prediction. Each calculation, each assumption, dissolved like a mirage in the heat of sunlight. You imagine standing at the edge of a cosmic field, watching a leaf caught in invisible wind. Gravity pulls from one direction, light pushes from another, and yet the object drifts as if it listens to neither. It feels almost deliberate, as though its movement follows an unseen rhythm, one not yet written in equations you know. Astronomers name it 3I/Atlas, though even the name feels temporary, a placeholder for understanding. Instruments measure, computers model, and still, the answers shimmer between possibilities. Its shape, smooth and symmetrical, gleams too perfectly for rock, yet lacks the icy vapor of a comet. In the thin radiance of the sun, it gleams like polished metal, but perhaps it's only sunlight tricking the eye. Perhaps the mystery lies not in the object itself, but in the way we see. Every measurement begins with expectation. You expect comets to shed, asteroids to spin predictably, dust to scatter according to light. But the moment something defies these rules, your mind begins its quiet search for a new pattern, like a dream that won't resolve into clear meaning. 3I/Atlas invites endless interpretations. Each hypothesis, interstellar rock, fragment of broken world, or even remnant of something once engineered, is a reflection of your own longing to name the unknown. The science of mystery is not about immediate answers. It is about the pause between data and certainty, the slow breath where imagination fills the gap. In that space, wonder becomes its own form of inquiry. You learn to hold a question gently, without closing it too soon, to look not for conclusion, but for clarity in the unknown's light. Night after night, Telescopes trace its orbit. The object moves with both grace and disobedience. It arcs around the sun, yet its trajectory resists prediction, as it remembers another star's pull. Perhaps it carries the fingerprint of another system, the gravitational handwriting of a sun long vanished from view. In this way, it is both traveler and witness. You think about how all things, planets, moons, people, are shaped by where they came from. Even if they drift far, some subtle imprint of origin remains. In a meteor's isotopes, you can read the temperature of ancient nebulae. In the tilt of an orbit, you can glimpse the tug of long-lost companions. Maybe this mystery, too, is a kind of memory, an echo of forces that shaped it before it crossed the gulf between stars. Light from our sun touches it now, awakening dormant brightness on its surface. You picture that gleam, tiny yet pure, reflecting back to the void toward Earth. For a brief time, human eyes, instruments, and imagination converge upon this single grain of strangeness. You, sitting beneath the same sun, feel the thread of connection, a quiet recognition that curiosity, too, is a kind of gravity. It pulls you toward understanding, not through force, but through invitation. Scientists analyze spectral lines, tracing chemical hints like whispers from stone. The readings are faint, too ambiguous to define. There are traces of carbon, hints of metal, patterns that neither match asteroids nor comets exactly. It's as though 3IATLAS carries both stories within it, refusing to belong entirely to one or the other. Like a word caught between languages, it speaks in both dialects of the cosmos, the icy voice of comets, the stony silence of asteroids. You feel the humility of that confusion. To not know is not failure. It is fidelity to reality's complexity. The world, after all, does not owe you simplicity. The cosmos never promised to be tidy. To face mystery is to stand before the unpolished truth that nature is greater than the names you give it. Somewhere inside that realization, peace begins to form. You no longer chase certainty. You listen instead. The object, the instruments, the light, all become part of conversation without end. Perhaps what matters most is not defining what it is, but simply noticing that it is. That something born between the stars has wandered close enough for you to wonder about it at all. As the weeks pass, its path curves outward again. It slips slowly back toward the dark between suns. Its light fades, then vanishes entirely from detection. The mystery, unresolved, returns to silence. Yet in its wake, it leaves a subtle shift, a reminder that knowledge is not a straight road but a spiral, circling ever closer to truth while never quite touching it. You imagine it now, drifting once more into the deep, carrying the sun's warmth on its smooth surface, a final echo of our curiosity fading into interstellar night. Somewhere, perhaps another civilization will see it too, and wonder as you did. The cosmos becomes a shared question whispered across time, a dialogue written in gravity and light. The telescope's final images are archived. The files bear numbers, coordinates, timestamps, the technical relics of observation. But beneath them lies something less measurable, the emotional trace of awe, the awareness that, for a brief moment, human attention reached out across billions of kilometers and touched the unknown. You close your eyes and imagine that contact, not physical, but perceptual. The act of seeing becomes its own bridge between worlds. Mystery, then, is not the absence of understanding, but the presence of invitation. It is what keeps you awake beneath the stars, what keeps you looking upward even when you cannot name what you see. And as your thoughts drift, the light of 3IATLAS becomes a gentle metaphor for all the things that enter your life without explanation, linger for a while, and then fade, leaving you changed simply because you notice them. Some mysteries do not need solving. They need witnessing. You breathe, slow and deep, letting the unknown rest beside you like a quiet companion. The stars, too, are questions that never demand answers. They only remind you to keep wondering, softly, endlessly. Somewhere ahead, another light begins to rise on the horizon of thought. Not an object this time, but an idea. The patterns that connect such wanderers. The invisible relationships written into their motion. You begin to sense that even mysteries have a kind of order, and that perhaps is where the next chapter begins. You imagine reaching out, fingertips brushing a surface older than memory. The object drifts through space, silent and slow, its body wrapped in ancient ice. Beneath that fragile crust lies time itself, condensed, preserved, waiting. The cold is not just absence, it is protection. Each molecule sleeps in stillness, untouched since the age before our star began to shine. The sunlight that now warms its outer skin has traveled 93 million miles to arrive, a brief encounter after billions of years of solitude. You can almost hear the faint crackle of sublimating ice, the soft sigh of gases waking after an eternity of darkness. They escape like breath, like a whisper from the dawn of everything. You picture a cross-section of its body, and it becomes a book written in layers. The outermost ice holds the latest chapters. Frozen vapor from its last visit near the sun deeper down. The words grow older. Carbon dioxide and methane trapped when the solar system was still dust and fire. Further still, you find signatures from before our sun existed, molecular relics from another star's death, folded into this wandering form. Comets and interstellar bodies are more than debris. They are time capsules. Their atoms carry the chemistry of beginnings. In their ices lie water older than Earth's oceans, carbon chains that once drifted in nebulae, and silicate dust that formed in the outflow of red giants. Each grain tells a story of heat and collapse, of gravity's patient weaving. You think about how fragile these archives are. A single pass near the sun can erase eons of record, the heat carving away layers that no one will ever read. And yet, even as they shed their past, they create something new, a shimmering comb of gas and dust, the soft halo that gives comets their beauty. What evaporates also reveals. Loss, too, becomes illumination. You realize that the same is true of memory itself. Your mind, like these ancient travelers, holds layers of experience. Some are bright and recent. Others lie buried, compacted by years. When warmth touches them, a smell, a sound, a thought, they rise again, shimmering briefly before fading back into silence. Perhaps the mind and the comet are kin. Both are archives that remember through transformation. Scientists study these objects to learn how planets form, how organic molecules arise, how water found its way to Earth. But the deeper story they tell is more personal. That creation is never clean or singular. It is a slow accumulation, a layering of chaos into coherence. Dust becomes rock. Rock gathers ice. Ice preserves chemistry. And chemistry dreams itself into life. In laboratories on Earth, grains collected from comets are examined under microscopes. Some contain amino acids, the raw materials of living things. You imagine those specks, tiny and colorless, lying quietly in petri dishes under bright human light, unaware that they are being recognized as the seeds of possibility. Somewhere, billions of years ago, these same molecules drifted through nebular clouds, colliding gently, breaking, reforming, waiting for a world to catch them. When you look at such fragments, you are also looking backward, not just in time, but into origin itself. Before oceans, before DNA, before thought. The ice and dust remember what it felt like to be unformed, to float in the womb of stars. And somehow, through immense patience and chance, that same material has now become the eyes that study it. You are the consciousness of ancient dust, awakened and self-aware. The boundary between science and poetry blurs here, as it often does in the quiet spaces between facts. You begin to feel that these frozen relics are not simply evidence of the past. They are companions across time. They move through space not as leftovers, but as reminders that nothing truly vanishes. It only changes state. Ice becomes vapor, vapor becomes tail, and tail becomes memory written into sunlight. As the object nears the sun, it glows, a halo of dust forming around it, like a veil of remembrance. Telescopes watch as it brightens, each flare revealing new details, each moment also erasing what came before. You think of it as a kind of cosmic performance, a slow, graceful surrender. To burn, to melt, to vanish is also to speak. Its gases expand into the solar wind, spreading traces of its story across millions of miles. Even as it fades, it leaves a fingerprint on space. That is how time moves in the universe, not as a line, but as diffusion. Every particle drifts outward, carrying with it the imprint of what it once was. You, too, are made of such diffusions, remnants of supernovae, atoms recycled through countless stars. Within you are the ashes of ancient suns, the cool breath of nebulae, the whisper of comets that once circled unseen. To exist is to participate in this endless redistribution of matter and memory. You close your eyes and imagine time not as a ticking clock, but as a field of motion. Particles flowing, freezing, thawing, recombining. Ice is only a pause in that flow. It holds a past still for a while, until warmth invites it to move again. Perhaps everything you know, everything you are, is caught somewhere in that rhythm, between stillness and motion, between memory and renewal. The more you contemplate it, the more you realize that the universe itself might be built upon the art of remembering, not through thought, but through persistence. Every atom holds a record of where it has been. The iron in your blood once burned in a dying star. The calcium in your bones once floated in cosmic dust. The water you drink might contain molecules that once touched the ice of 3IATLAS. You are not separate from this history. You are its continuation. And so you breathe softly, letting that thought settle into you, that every inhale carries a little of the cosmos, every exhale returns a little of you to it. The distinction between observer and observed dissolves. You are the dust remembering itself. You are the ice melting into awareness. Far beyond, the object drifts onward, leaving behind a fading trail, a thread of frozen time unraveling into sunlight. Someday, that trail will disperse completely, invisible and forgotten. But for now, in this brief age of seeing, it glows. And because you looked, it will live a little longer. In data, in story, in memory. There is peace in that impermanence. The comet teaches you that nothing lasts, but everything leaves a trace. Even the faintest trail in the dark becomes a kind of light for someone, somewhere, who looks up and wonders. And as that light fades into the vast silence of space, you find yourself thinking about what else might be written in the unseen, in the empty stretches between stars, where time itself begins to lose its shape.